Six News senior reporter Lincoln Holmes has the latest.
I don't think One Nation's winning in 6.
I just cannot see a reality where the Liberals are like 1 or 2 seats off forming a majority.
Australian news organisation Six News,
the only news and current affairs channel which presents the perspectives of people their own age.
In my view, they're the best media outlet in our nation.
The Prime Minister gets up and says this, and I'm thinking, does this come from Channel 6 News?
Adam Bandt, welcome back to Six News.
Thanks for having me.
Bob Carter, welcome to Six News.
God bless all the listeners.
David Christopherly, thank you so much for joining us here on Six News once again.
My pleasure, Austin. Thanks for having me back.
Senator Fatima Payman joins Six News now. Anthony Albanese, welcome to Six News.
Live and exclusive on Six News, this is the South Australian Senate debate. Now, here's Leonardo Puglisi.
A very good evening to you. It's just past 7:30pm Australian Eastern Daylight Time, 7pm in South Australia, and welcome into the SA Senate debate featuring 4 key candidates running for the upper house at this federal election. You're going to hear a lot from them tonight on the big issues, the questions that you want answered, and some of the views that they have, and they'll get the chance to share all of them tonight. If you've been with us for the past 2, you'll know that the rules are pretty simple, but here they are again. Each candidate will get an opening and a closing statement of about a minute maximum. I'll fess up, I forgot the closing statement last time. We should remember it this time. They'll have a maximum of 1 minute to answer questions. Now, I'm manually timing that, but we ask them because of time sincerely, please do keep it to a maximum 1 minute. At the end, there'll also be a chance for a candidate to ask one question to one other candidate that we don't know at Six News, and they may choose to pass on that if they want, but we'll wait and see whether that happens. The candidates joining us tonight are from 4 key parties. Well, one's not technically in a party anymore, but we'll get to that. Christopher Brohier from Family First, Jennifer Game from One Nation, Rex Patrick, former Senator now with the Jacqui Lambie Network, and Dianah Walter with the SA Matters unregistered, unendorsed group, formerly of Legalise Cannabis, and at Six News we made the decision to continue having her on this debate, and we're very happy to have her and all the other candidates here with us tonight. If you'll notice, by the way, it appears we just have lost Jennifer Game of a minute before we went to air. Should have her back in a second, but we will proceed as we can, and we'll get to our opening statements first of all. So, alphabetical order by surname, Christopher Brohier, if you could give your opening statement, the floor's yours.
Thank you, Leo. I'm a barrister by profession. I've practiced in Adelaide for about 40 years. For about 7 years, I was the State Director for the Australian Christian Lobby, and for about a year, the Director of National Policy. I have extensive experience in law, legislation, and dealing with parliaments. And I'll bring that to the table. The Family First Party advances 3 key policies at this election. First, to attack the cost of living by attacking power prices. Second, to promote holistic care for young sex-confused children and oppose harmful, irreversible gender-affirming medicine and the promotion of gender-fluid ideology in schools to young kids. And thirdly, to promote and support the freedom of parents to have their kids educated according to their faith in Christian and faith-based education, and to oppose changes to the Sex Discrimination Act to remove the protections that exist. For those reasons, we ask you to vote 1 Family First in the Senate. Thank you.
Thank you for your opening statement. We would get to Jennifer Game next. Again, I'm hoping she can hear me. She is not on camera. We cannot hear her. I'm not sure if she can hear us. We hope to get to her in a second. So, somewhat unusually, Rex Patrick, if you could go with your opening statement then.
Yeah, thank you very much, Leo. So I'm Rex Patrick. I'm a former Senator for South Australia with a very strong track record of representing our state in the Senate. I basically run with the idea that common sense makes sense. I'm not about left or right. I'm about right or wrong. And indeed, I have a strong view that we need to have an independent back in the Senate representing our state rather than a senator exclusively, as we have at the moment, senators representing parties rather than their state. I'm running for the Jacqui Lambie network, so I'd say vote 1 above the line for the Jacqui Lambie network.
All right, thank you very much. We'll continue to move forward with this. Dianah, Walter, your opening statement.
Thank you, Leo. We understand that the Senate fulfils its role on the government by scrutinising bills and legislation. I'm running with Dr. Rod Pearce, AM, and we give a commitment to South Australians to apply a distinctly South Australian lens to anything that came before us should we manage to take a seat in the upcoming election. So from the coast to the city and every region in between, we believe strongly that your postcode really shouldn't determine the level of representation you receive, nor should your socio-economic status. So we believe strongly that SA matters and South Australians matter. So we're here to represent the voices of South Australians.
Thank you very much. We still do not have Jennifer Game. We hope to have her back shortly. If she wants to rejoin from her laptop with the delay, she is welcome to, but we are going to proceed because there is a lot to get through. And Ms. Walter, I'll open this question to you first of all. It's a question we've asked in our previous 2 debates, but it's such an important issue that we are going to keep bringing it up again, and it is the cost of living crisis. Australians do agree that this is one of, if not the top issue at this federal election. What do you think has caused it, and how do you propose we get out of it?
The causes are many and varied, and there is a number of, especially living in regional communities. I think the cost of living is exacerbated by the fact of transport costs, getting services to regions. We have pressures on our economy from abroad and internally. There are a whole range of issues that people are talking to us about in terms of just putting food on the table and paying for rents. There's so many different levels of concern that South Australians have. The cost of accessing health services and certainly the cost of just generally, like I said, putting a roof over your head. What we propose to do is to ensure that we hear the voices of the peak bodies, the groups that can help inform changes to policy. And we have got some detail that I'll share with the listeners a little bit later in the debate in terms of what we can do to help with better access to healthcare and certainly better access to jobs and skills, for instance. Thank you, Leo.
Mr. Patrick, similar question. What are your thoughts on what's caused the current situation we find ourselves in?
Well, the causes can also be just directly linked to some of the cures. Firstly, we are paying way too much for electricity. Electricity prices here in South Australia are set by the gas prices, and the gas prices are set by the gas cartel, who basically are extracting all of our gas to export it overseas and leaving very little here for Australians. It's our gas, and it ought to be produced and provided to us at a much lower cost than what it is. We see in Western Australia, they have a gas reservation policy. Their cost of gas is of the order of $5 to $6 per gigajoule. Here in South Australia, we pay something above $12 per gigajoule. And that situation exists purely and simply because the duopoly are captured by that gas cartel. Other things we can do, reducing the cost of housing. One simple thing there that you can do is prevent foreigners from investing in residential property. That takes away properties that young Australians could otherwise have. And doing things like tackling Coles and Woolies, the duopoly of the supermarkets, using things like divestiture laws that allow courts to break up Coles and Woolies in the event that they are found to engage in monopoly misconduct and using their status to gouge Australians. So there's just a few ideas. There are more, but there's a spread for you.
Mr. Brohier, families are undoubtedly feeling the brunt of much of this, which does tie in with your party as well. I'll again ask the same question. We know what's really caused the current situation that we find ourselves in, and that has left so many families struggling.
The cost of energy, Leo, affects everything. Energy is life in our community. And from 2007 to 2023-24, the real cost of energy has gone up 65%. And we know from AEMO that it's going to go up something like 9% across the country in the next pricing period, and about 3 to 5% in South Australia. That is a direct result of government policy. The push to renewables is the real reason behind the cost of living crisis. And we have to change. We have to go back to the cheap, dense power that we have in spades in Australia. We have 500 years of coal in the Latrobe. We have 400 years of gas in Beetaloo. We have a third of the world's uranium. We have to push for dense power, coal, gas, or uranium. That's the answer to cost of living. We should have the cheapest power in the world. We have about the most expensive.
I have to intervene there and just say that the electricity price is set by the gas price. There's no one would question that. It's not renewables that is causing the high price of electricity here in South Australia. That's just factually incorrect.
Well, I'm sorry, Rex. I think you're wrong. I'm sorry. And it's interesting that Rex and Jacqui Lambie are very willing to criticize. They've talked about price gouging and monopolistic behavior with Coles and Woolworths. There's no evidence of that. We have anti-monopoly laws which can be effected. So they're just some of the grumbles that happen from a party like Jacqui Lambie.
Section 46 of the Competition and Consumer Act allows for the ACCC to deal with egregious conduct, but it's rather wet lettuce leaf. In the last Parliament, there was a change in relation to some of the energy companies in respect of divestiture laws, but not for Coles and Woolies. It's an accepted practice. Again, that's about making a power available to courts to break up companies if they engage in improper conduct. It's something that's used extensively, the law exists in the United States, and it's rarely used because it sits there simply as a deterrent. When I moved an amendment in the 46th Parliament to have that applied more broadly across the economy, both the Labor Party and the Liberal Party voted against it. Jacqui was a separate party at that point in time. She supported me along with much of the crossbench.
Ms. Walter, I saw you kind of nodding along a bit before in regards to renewables. Any comment there?
Renewables are the way to go. I think we've certainly missed the boat when it comes to anything to do with nuclear energy. And in terms of South Australia, we've got a long and proud history of delivering renewable energy to South Australians. The way of the future is renewables. Certainly gas will bolster that transition, and there is a place for it. But right now, the drought right now in South Australia is not lost on me. So I think there is very much a place for renewables, and certainly going down the pathway and even considering going back to thermal energy is probably, it's ill-founded.
I think respectfully that they're the nice wishes of people, but if you look at the cost of renewables going forward, say on an 80-year span, renewables will kill us. If we go...
That is the ground truth. It's a document prepared by scientists. It's a non-partisan document, and it's very clear that renewables are cheaper than the other sources of energy.
Well, that's just nonsense. They can't be cheaper, and there are no unbiased comments or reports in this space. Having practiced for 40 years at the bar, I know that no expert presents an unbiased view. And The simple fact is that because solar and wind are at least 50% inefficient, you have to have batteries, you have to have gas to back you up. You have to have a threefold power system. You have to have new transmission lines, and they only last about 25 years. So for the cost of one coal power station, you have to have two tranches of renewables. For a cost of one nuclear station, you have 3 tranches of renewables. It simply has to cost more. And it's a very interesting fact that Australia, you can check this on the CSIRO website, Australia is now greener than it was in 2007. So the climate catastrophism, which is propelled by many people, just isn't happening.
I think
can I just let Ms. Walter jump in, just because she was name dropped a couple of answers ago in regards to SA Matters policy. So if you've got any comment there, and then Mr. Patrick, I'll get to you.
Thank you. I don't know how I could tell someone working in agriculture right now that we haven't got an issue with climate. Renewables are definitely the way to go, and Rex has said it, and I'll restate it. The evidence is in, the facts are there, the research has been done, the numbers have been crunched, and industry is moving well away from thermal power and transitioning to a cleaner, greener future. And that's the way, and South Australia is a leader in this. You just need to drive around our state, and I'm not sure how much regional travel you do, but there is certainly some incredible wind resources in our communities, and certainly solar that is powering homes right now as we speak.
Yeah, I do lots of regional travel, Dianah. I've been up to the mid-north. I was just come back from the southeast yesterday, and I know that China is building 131 new coal power stations. India is building about 32. The US has pulled out and is going to drill and build thermal power stations. So we're going to be left behind by cheap energy. That's the fact of the world.
Mr. Patrick, I know you wanted to make a comment there, so I'll let you make this, and I'll just predate this by saying 20 minutes in, we've got one question, so if you can keep it to time.
Very, very short. You have a choice of trusting CSIRO, our premier scientific body, or you can go with Family First. That's the choice you've got.
Not quite. There's a massive amount of literature that supports this position.
Right. There's a lot of literature we could read, but we'll have all night. I do want to also, just as a transparency update for our viewers, we are desperately working to get Jennifer Game on, come in and out of the Zoom. We are doing our best, but we promise she's not excluded from this debate. So we will proceed though. And I want to touch on something else. And Ms. Walter, I'll also direct this one to you. And by the way, some of these questions are going to be weirdly out of order now, but we'll continue. Immigration's also been mentioned as an issue, and I'm curious. Do you think that it is something that is affecting the broader cost of living issue, and including, arguably, especially housing?
No, I don't. I look around our communities, and I look at the industries that rely heavily on labour, immigrant labour, and people that are willing to do jobs that some of our people in our community won't do. And I think about my personal experience of looking around our hospitals and our aged care facilities, fruit picking, abattoirs. If we didn't have the input from labour and people coming to Australia and calling Australia home, I believe we'd be in a far greater world of pain. So I don't believe there's an issue with immigrants taking up our housing. Not at all.
Okay, I do want to interrupt this conversation because it does look like we have Jennifer Game with us. I think she can hear me. I can see her. I'm hoping she can hear us. Ms. Game, can you hear us?
Technical problems. Thanks very much.
All good. You know what? We're gonna really shift up the format here. You've got the chance to make a 1-minute opening statement. If you would like to make that on its own now, you're welcome to do that.
I was just going to follow up on the last speaker and say that I think we do need to scale back immigration to take the pressure off rents and to lower inflation, and that pretending there's no relationship between immigration and rising rents just ignores arithmetic and means that young people are going to continue to be disproportionately affected because they've got fewer economic resources and they already experience the highest rates of homelessness. South Australia historically builds about 2,500 to 3,000 homes a year, but we double that building rate just to accommodate the 25,000 overseas arrivals from last year. And we're not able to do that. And not all of those homes will go to the rental market. So I'm very concerned about the future of young people. It's one of the things that is brought up with me most commonly. And I think that One Nation can solve that by lowering the rate of immigration. Thanks.
Mr. Patrick, I'm interested in your thoughts on this. You know, when you were a senator, you had the coalition in power, and they kind of, throughout their 9 years, you know, stop the boats is something that's very associated with their time in power. Again, what would your approach be in relation to immigration, especially when, I guess, I'd imagine you're trying to influence policy on the Senate crossbench?
Yeah, look, I think there is a case to slowing immigration over the last couple of years. It really has blown out. You've got to always look at the reasons that sit behind immigration, and it can't just be to boost GDP or to inflate housing prices to the benefit of existing owners. You have to look at this from a national economy perspective. We need to match our immigration to the needs within our economy. That includes looking at what skills are required and where those skills are required. So, you know, I'd like to see a lot more people coming to South Australia than perhaps to regional South Australia than to perhaps Sydney, which is bursting at the seams. So there are smart ways to do this, and I'll just add in there that we do want to try and match our immigration to other integrated plans that look at transport, that look at infrastructure, that look at housing, so we don't end up with immigration that is divorced from the needs of the people that are already in the community and that might come to the community. And just finally, any immigrant that comes here and can integrate, they make Australia better. Every day I wander into a shop, and whether it's getting Chinese food or Italian food or Greek food, and all the skills they bring just makes Australia a wonderful place.
Mr. Brohier, I'm interested just in your thoughts as well, and you know, especially in something that Ms. Game touched on, which was how is this affecting housing? How is this affecting young people? Again, your overall thoughts on our current immigration system and levels?
Thanks, Leo. So I'm an immigrant. I'm the son of immigrants. So I'm in support of immigration, but I believe that controlled, targeted immigration is of net benefit to Australia. However, in the last few years, where immigration, apart from COVID times, was around 200,000 a year, in the last couple of years, we've had 500,000 plus and 400,000 plus. And I think that's too much. I think it's got to come back to the around 200,000 a year mark, and that'll take a tremendous pressure off the housing market. It is, as Jennifer says quite correctly, it is a must consequence that if you have more people coming in, it's going to put more pressure on the housing market and stop more young people, make it harder for more young people to access their first home. And we've had personal experience of that from some of our children looking for houses and being outbid. So I think we've got to bring it back to what it was before the last couple of years.
Ms. Game, I'm interested, you know, One Nation does take kind of a hardline approach on immigration. Just again, and thank you for moving to a brighter room, by the way. We can see everyone clearly now, so it all looks good. The question though, you know, is there a specific figure that you'd like to cut it down to, or is it just kind of stop it all immediately? What's One Nation really pushing for here?
So the party, in terms of having a hard line, the hard line that we take is that we want migrants who are going to be loyal to this country, who are going to contribute to this country, and they're going to integrate into our way of life. So that's the hard line position. In terms of numbers, we're looking at sustainable levels of immigration, and that sustainable level will vary depending on the number of people who leave, because the number of people who arrive less the number of people who leave is what determines the size of our population. And so it's a variable number, but we're looking for, you know, a historic sustainable level, probably in the order, maybe, you know, in that 130,000, 150,000 range, but it would vary depending on the number of ins and the number of outs, really.
Just moving on from this into another topic that does affect global affairs here, and it is our relationship with the US, and that's been in the spotlight in the past couple of weeks. I think from some there seems to be a bit of growing lack of trust in the United States. Only hours before our Victorian debate, tariffs were implemented. For instance, Ms. Game, this one to you first. Can we still rely on the US as a strong ally?
I don't really know, and that's the problem. We've underspent on defence for so long that we don't have a deterrent capacity anymore. And, you know, what we've seen the current president do is basically say you need to be able to look after yourself. You know, don't expect us to do it. And I think that's a very reasonable position. And I think we should be able to provide reasonable deterrence. So we should be investing far more in defence, and especially into our personnel on whom everything relies.
Mr. Patrick, I know you've been critical of AUKUS. Again, I'm interested, what's your alternative to an alliance with the US at the moment, especially with its current administration?
Well, we have a long-standing relationship with the United States. However, things have changed. I don't think anyone would suggest that everything is normal, and we have seen a US president that has engaged in things that don't kind of sit with our values. You know, threats to invade Panama, threats to take Greenland, to try and annex Canada as the 51st state, basically endorsing Putin's invasion of Ukraine. These are all things that are inconsistent with Australian values. There's no doubt that there's been a change in Washington, and we need to react to that. And in some sense, it's a good wake-up call. I want to have a strong, capable, flexible, and sovereign defence force capability. And I'm going to depart briefly from Jennifer's views in respect of defence. Look, there are people that advocate for spending more money, but I don't think we can spend more money with defence until they start spending it responsibly. To give a couple of examples, we spent $4 billion not buying a French submarine. We've had a future frigate program that's blown out by 2 to 3 years in terms of delivery, and $15 billion. We've got a defence department, and I'm not being critical of any of our soldiers, airmen or sailors. I'm talking about people in Canberra that are simply not spending our money wisely. And I think we've got to take, whilst I sort of agree with this sentiment that we've got to have, we need to look at defence spending. We need to look at how they spend it first and fix that problem so that we don't end up with more defence waste.
Mr. Brohier, your party's platform does explicitly call for, quote unquote, supporting the US alliance that guarantees Australia's national security, end quote. Is that still guaranteed with the current situation we find ourselves in, and with what the US is currently proposing and doing?
Well, we don't know. We know we have a treaty, and we would assume that the US will honour that treaty. But as Jennifer said, it's respectfully wrong for us to rely completely on the US. We have to develop our own capacities. And one of the issues is we have to staff the ADF. Now, ADF shrank last year, And it's my submission that the diversity, equity, inclusion policies that the ADF is promoting hasn't worked. It doesn't work. We've got to recruit people on the basis of merit. The Americans have done that. For better or for worse, you may criticize President Trump, not that it matters what we say about him, but since he's coming to power, the US has started meeting their recruiting targets, which they weren't under President Biden, and the American forces are growing. We have to start getting the message out that you can come into the ADF on the basis of merit, not on the basis of DEI, and that will help us.
Just to rebut some of that, and I'm not sure whether Christopher would depart too much from what I'm about to say, but in terms of looking at the US alliance and talking about treaties, we have a free trade agreement with the United States, and they are breaching that agreement. So there's no question that the United States is not meeting its written commitments to us. Just in relation to diversity across our Defence Force, look, I think that there's a conflation of issues there. Our Defence Force only recruits on the basis of merit. That's the way it has done business for a very long time. And if you doesn't matter about your diversity, as long as you meet the criterias that are equal across the Defence Force. Look, the requirements for a pilot might be greater than that for a cook, but it is a merit-based system that we have already for our Defence Force recruitment.
Any response to that, Mr. Brohier, just quickly?
That's not the optics that the Defence provides. You can read Greg Sheridan writing in The Australian about this recently, that the ADF is promoting DEI concepts, and therefore I respectfully disagree with Rex.
Well, I'm a former member of the Defence Force, and I still am in contact with many members of the Defence Force. I've been through the process myself. I think following Greg Sheridan's views on this might be a little bit dangerous in this instance.
Well, it may be, maybe not. Greg Sheridan is the leading defence commentator in this country. And so perhaps you're wrong, Rex. As to the issue of tariffs, that's a completely different issue to a defence treaty if we're at risk. But I pick up on what Jennifer said. We can't expect America to come to our aid all the time, and we can't expect to build our defense on America. We have to start being able to stand on our own 2 feet. And it was tragically shown when the Chinese sailed 3 ships around Australia, and we couldn't even put a frigate in the water to follow them. We couldn't even put a plane to follow them. We had to rely on Virgin Airlines. So something's
that's simply
wrong.
not correct, okay? There was an Anzac frigate that was trailing.
That was a New Zealand frigate. It wasn't one of ours.
No, there was an Australian frigate that was trailing that vessel. There were Australian aircraft trailing the vessels. At one stage, our partner, New Zealand, took over the trailing activity because we cooperate in a joint fashion with them. So, and look, just so everyone's clear here, there is nothing unlawful that the Chinese did in terms of circumnavigating Australia. We, all of the time, exercise our right of freedom of navigation through the exclusive economic zone of China. They've done exactly the same thing. The point, and this, you are correct in this regard, the point that we take away from that circumnavigation is that the Chinese Navy is no longer a brown water navy; it's a blue water navy that can deploy in distance. But we were able to respond to the circumnavigation. And you also don't know, Christopher, and I don't know, but being a former submariner, I suspect there was also other assets looking at those vessels as they travelled around our coastline.
All right, I'm just conscious. I'm very conscious of time, Mr. Brohier. Very brief response, if you can.
Well, respectfully, is that there's a massive difference between our maintaining the shipping lines through the South China Sea and China circumnavigating Australia for no apparent reason apart from to send a message and conducting live fire drills. There's a massive difference.
Ms. Walter, just very, very quickly, your thoughts on whether the US can still be relied on broadly as an ally.
Your original question, of course. While this is really, really important conversation, South Australians are really, this is not on their radar, for want of a better word. They're worried about cost of living, health, jobs, the economy more broadly. And if we look at what's happening in the US now, and certainly I was reading some polling recently, and half of Australians disapprove of the actions that Trump are taking, and 34% of Australians are strongly disapproving, and we see that even from US citizens. Yes, we do need to protect our borders, and we should be looking for, as has been described, a plan B. But what about our closest neighbours? What about looking towards Indonesia and other countries that we probably need to have better relations with? But I want to bring it back to local, to South Australia, and we talked just briefly about veterans and recruitment to the ADF. I think there's a really strong case for looking after those that are already in the ADF, especially our veterans that are suffering terribly with PTSD and traumatic brain injury. Who's talking about that right now? I don't think anyone's talking about that. So all these other global issues are certainly important, and they're going to be a very important platform for the two majors leading up to polling day. If we bring this back to a local and a South Australian perspective, most mums and dads and people on just barely a living wage are more concerned about cost of living, health, accessing doctors, and certainly putting a roof over their heads as we've described. Thanks, Leo.
Right, you say that, but I will. The next question, and Ms. Game, this one's going to you first. The next question is about still an international issue, and Israel and Hamas has been brought up in Parliament quite a bit over the last kind of 1.5 years. It's become continually relevant. It's kind of gone back into the headlines this week after Israel did resume airstrikes in Gaza, which have reportedly killed at least 100 children there. Ms. Game, to you first. Your party has voiced support for Israel. I know you've previously said that all deaths on Hamas. How are you going to address this conflict in Parliament for all the South Australians who are really, really concerned with what's going on in the Middle East?
Firstly, foreign policy, like you've described, that's really a matter for the government of the day. What I would say is that our party and personally, I respect Israel's right to defend itself, and the deaths in Gaza are quite dreadful, but they could have been avoided by returning the hostages. I don't think Hamas has really focused on building a new nation. It's really more about destroying another one. But the problem that I see is when migrants, and it does from anywhere, bring their problems here, that old conflicts are brought into Australia and they're acted out here. And I don't want that. And I'm not only talking about the Middle East, I'm talking about old historic conflicts, of which there are many here. I think you leave them at the door when you come to Australia and you become an Australian citizen and you are loyal to this country and you integrate and you work hard and you don't take out those conflicts on the people who are living here.
Mr. Patrick, your thoughts on, I guess, what's going on in the Middle East, and also, how it might be shaping this election. It has been brought up, quite a bit over the past, 1.5 years.
Yeah, look, I think that, I mentioned before when I was talking about immigration policy, I mentioned the need to have people integrate properly. And I agree with Jennifer that people that come here do need to leave their fights behind. Now, obviously, there's very little that we can say here in Australia that will affect what's happening in the Middle East. So I'll just really put my position relatively clearly in respect of what's happening there, noting that it's such a complex environment that goes back to 1947 and a whole manner of events that have taken place. You can't just look at things in isolation, but here goes. I condemn Hamas for what happened on October the 7th. I condemn Israel for its overreaching in Gaza. I condemn Hezbollah. I condemn the Houthis. I condemn Hezbollah. I condemn Iran. There's just been violence, unnecessary violence, and one can only hope for peace in the Middle East and people working towards that.
Of course, just on what Ms. Game said, but I'll let you, Mr. Patrick, answer it, is that, we have seen plenty of protests in relation to this, and of course, it's not unusual for something going on overseas to get a protest here. Ukraine in March 2022, February 22 had plenty of protests and still does. Is there also argument that it's fair for migrants from these countries and people who have ancestors in these countries to be asking the Australian government and Australian parliamentarians to be speaking up a bit more?
Well, I don't mind if people go out into the street and draw attention to any particular issue. I think the concern I think that also the Jennifer was pressing was the concern about engaging in violent activity here. Everyone should respect the debate. It is a complex debate, and we should let that happen. We can try and influence our politicians, but I just think people need to understand that there's very little that can be said here in Australia that ultimately will influence what happens in the Middle East.
Mr. Brohier, just quickly, your thoughts on this. Would you agree with that view that forget the Australian government, what an Australian crossbench senator says just doesn't have much influence?
That's right. That's the fact. But I want to say that there is no excuse for anti-Semitism in Australia, and there has been anti-Semitism expressed. That must stop, and the authorities must take strong action to stop it. The Jewish community is very concerned. I've spent time talking to the Jewish community in Adelaide, and they're very concerned. Some people are talking about making Aliyah, going to Israel rather than being here, and that's regrettable. The Jewish community has contributed massively to Australia, and anti-Semitism must be rejected.
All right. Well, I want to get back home now, and Mr. Brohier, I'll direct this one to you. Family First, at least in your official platform, you're not officially a Christian party. I know you and many of its candidates do talk about basing things around Christian values. Of course, many have worked for the Australian Christian lobby. I know, including yourself. Do you think you'll be able to effectively represent the 60% of South Australians who are not Christian?
Yes, because our constitution, Leo, is founded fairly and squarely on the Judeo-Christian ethic. The preamble to our constitution says, "We, the people of New South Wales, Tasmania, etc., humbly relying on Almighty God." The concept of representative government is based on the concept of the dignity of the individual, which is fairly and squarely a Judeo-Christian concept, that we're all made in the image of God. And part of that, built into section 116 of the Constitution, is that the Commonwealth cannot legislate for any religion. It can't proscribe a religion, can't advance a religion. So part of the dictate of the biblical view of life is that whereas we assert a truth, we don't force it on anyone. We are willing to, the Bible invites us to discourse. There's a verse that says, "Come now, let us reason together." So I'm prepared. The Christian concept, the Jewish Christian concept, allows us to take other views in hand and represent them.
Ms. Walter, I don't know your religious beliefs, I'm not asking for them, but more broadly, do you think that religion and politics can mix, especially when you're thinking of how to vote on certain things, for instance?
First of all, going back to what we discussed earlier, if only peace was profitable, and if only we could, as humans living in our state, just be decent human beings, regardless of the colour of your skin, your religious, sexual orientation, or whatever it might be. If we could just get back to the basics of being just decent humans, I think that would solve a lot of problems. I think there are a lot of things that occur in our communities that are impacted by religious beliefs that need not be, and personal and freedom of choice around things like voluntary euthanasia and right to termination of a pregnancy, women's health rights, and certainly taking care of people in their final dying days and access to voluntary euthanasia. I don't think we're going to really make much inroad in this discussion tonight, but my point is we all have different views and values, but at the end of the day, if we can go on, get on with our business and just act in a respectful and a decent way, I think this place would be a much better place to live in. And again, most people on the street are not really that concerned about religion, or certainly not what people do when they're in the privacy of their own homes, but they're more interested in just getting along and getting on with life and having a peaceful existence. I don't think that's so much to ask for.
Mr. Patrick, your thoughts?
Well, I've been in the situation where, as a crossbencher with balance of power on issues where there were, for example, different views in relation to children that were had the potential to be kicked out of school on the basis of their gender designation. And I remember in that particular relatively tense situation in the Senate, the resolution that I negotiated with the then leader of the government, Matthias Cormann, was to send the issue to a Senate committee where we got to hear from everyone who had an interest in the issue, and that allowed us to sit down with the LGBTQI community, the religious community, lawyers, and find the right pathway. Look, no one's ever completely satisfied with legislation, but being able to listen to the community, it doesn't matter whether you have a religion or you don't have a religion, whether you're gay or straight, it doesn't matter, man or woman, as long as you can sit and listen to what everyone's got to say, you can generally find a reasonable pathway where you get a better outcome. And in fact, that particular situation was just the exact a really good example of where the crossbench did the absolute best for the Senate by forcing a committee to look at the issue to help resolve it.
Well, my internet's choppy. We'll see how this holds up. Ms. Game, just again quickly, your thoughts on how you would be as a senator kind of addressing things that are for a lot of people really important morally, as was just kind of touched on there.
So our view is that people should be given as many human rights as possible. However, our party believes that there are only two sexes, male and female. That's our position. That doesn't mean that we don't believe in gender fluidity theory, but we do believe in giving acceptance to people regardless of how they want to be. But I do object very strongly to the indoctrination that's going on in schools at the moment. I know that for a fact because my own granddaughter, when she was 4, told me one day that she could be a boy or a girl, and she had learnt that at preschool. She decided to be a girl because she liked pink so much. So I know that there is within our schools a very strong attempt to interfere and to sexualise our children, and I oppose that, and the party opposes that as well.
And Family First would stand shoulder to shoulder with Jennifer on that.
All right, Ms. Walter, you made the point before about South Australians, maybe they don't care about these kind of issues or not care. They're focused on other things. They're focused on cost of living. They're focused on housing. Are things that were just brought up there, gender fluidity in schools, is that something South Australians care about?
Oh, not the people I'm talking with. They're certainly more concerned about the roads they're driving on, the energy provider, whether their stock have got feed, whether they can get to work using public transport in the city. which is not a federal issue, but just everyday things. And let's just bring it back to South Australia and South Australians and these sorts of things that we're talking about now. Yes, they're important, but leading up to polling day, whenever that might be, there's other things that I think we can influence and certainly support or challenge.
In a related thing, Mr. Brohier, I'll direct this one to you. And, looking at Family First, platform, your party says abortion's wrong. There's been voicing support for undoing same-sex marriage. That plebiscite passed with majority support. Majority of Australians do support abortion in most cases. What makes you think South Australians would want to roll back the clock on these issues?
Well, Leo, we have in South Australia and across the country now abortion to birth. That's right up to birth. The majority of Australians do not support that. And we know that because we polled people in 2021 when the abortion to birth debate was happening here. And a significant majority of South Australians did not want abortion to birth. And Dianah talks about people coming up to her and not talking about certain issues. I was talking to a very senior politician just today who said when that went down in 2021, no one was coming up to him and saying we've got to have abortion to birth. Abortion to birth is a brutal policy. And it is now happening that late-term abortions are happening for simply social reasons. And we think that the majority of Australians don't want that. So the policies, the legislative proposals we propose are to do what's the law in South Australia and in New South Wales, do it nationally, that babies born alive as a result of failed abortions are given proper care. That's an unimpeachable policy. We want to bring in laws that allow mums who can't care for their babies to use Moses capsules in hospitals. And so they can give up the baby without fear of criminal punishment. We have to support mums and babies so that the only option a mum who has an unplanned pregnancy is not an abortion, but there are other alternatives. And a simple answer to that is that we provide on websites information about pregnancy support. Now, we can do all of that.
And then on, again, same-sex marriage, it's something, your party's voiced support for undoing. I mean, this was done in 2017. The people voted for it. Should you just kind of drop it at that point? Is it really something that's worth rehashing in 2025?
I'm not sure you're right that our policy says we want to undo same-sex marriage. We say we want to support the heterosexual marriage between a mum and a dad because that's the best for people across the board. And the sociological research shows that quite clearly. Same-sex marriage was dealt with. We've got that. We have to live with the consequences. One of the consequences is gender fluidity, which is harming kids.
Well, I'll just quote your National Director, Lyle Shelton. He says there is no reason the definition of marriage could not be restored in Australia. So you disagree with that position?
There is no reason. Well, I didn't know Lyle had said that. But realistically, I think that's not going to happen in the next term of Parliament, which is what we're talking about.
Well,
all right. Just quickly, Ms. Walter.
Sorry, while we're talking about women's health predominantly, if we're talking about women and obstetrics and having babies and giving birth, I just want to speak just briefly about a promise from Labor to put up $573 million for women's health, but it's only going to be for part of that care. And while endometriosis and menopause really do need to be a focus, we need to also think about breast screening and breast density. Children, of course, having children and raising children, mental health are also a part of a woman's life. And you're talking about one element of that. And I think what I would like to say is that the view that we would have, Rod and I do have, is that we'd like to see a focus on the whole of the woman in terms of that whole person care. And I think that's what South Australians care about. And we want to get back to having really good care and being able to pick up the phone and have a doctor almost from the cradle to the grave and have that integration with primary health and preventative health. Let's be talking about that. Let's talk about mental health for women and women's health, and let's come across and talk about men's health and what we can do differently as a community to raise them
Mr. Am I hearing some feedback? Maybe that's on me. Mr. Patrick, there's a question coming to you in a sec, but I'll just quickly get your thoughts on this so they're kind of out of the way. Do you see these topics being something that people and South Australians do care about? I'll note some of this is at a state level. You know, things like abortion are generally a state level issue.
Yeah, I was going to make the point that abortion is a state issue, and I think that the current legislation has got it right. We've got to let women make choices about their own body. I think just in relation to things like same-sex marriage, I think that is over. I voted for same-sex marriage. I just think that it harms no one to allow people to to join together for the rest of their life if that's what they want to do. And why do people even get flustered about it? So it doesn't affect anyone else.
All right. Oh, geez, did we just lose Christopher Brohier? Oh, well. Everyone's back. No, never mind. Okay. Mr. Patrick, yeah.
Breaking up a lot, Leo. I hear you, but you're breaking up a lot.
Okay, it seems you're clear now. We'll carry on. I think everyone else is good at the moment, so we'll continue on. This is fun, right, guys? Mr. Patrick, on a completely different note, you're obviously running for the Jacqui and Lambie network. I believe you joined the party just last year, just recently. Excluding Senator Lambie herself, 4 out of the 5 parliamentarians elected for the JLN ever have quit the party. Can you commit tonight to not leaving the party while in office if elected, as you had done with Centre Alliance?
Okay, just to clear up what happened with Centre Alliance, I joined the Nick Xenophon team, and I ended up replacing Nick Xenophon in the Senate. Then a new party was formed, which was Centre Alliance, and that's the party I left. So I was very strongly aligned and supportive of Nick. In terms of what may happen in the future with Jacqui and I, we are very experienced parliamentarians. So we know how to, look, there are some differences between us. She's Army, I'm Navy. The way in which we think about politics is slightly different, and I don't mean mine's better than hers or vice versa. We say that perhaps Jacqui's the hull, I'm the keel, and not the anchor. Look, Jacqui and I, one of the things I went through in terms of the process of deciding to run was a very lengthy period where Jacqui was very, very keen for me to run. And I almost got to the point where I was going to either have to take out an AVO or run. So I went with the latter, but I seriously sat down for about a month and we just worked through all of the things as to what would happen or how we would deal with disagreements. And we've got a nice, flexible policy in place. But the reality is, in general, you can, you don't have to die on a hill over differences within a party. It's only in the circumstances where there is a balance of power situation and the vote hangs on, say, Jacqui and I. At that point, it does matter that we align. And at that point in time, you have the power to do things like make amendments to legislation and so forth. We're very experienced. We know how to handle this. I look at what happened in Tasmania. Actually, Jacqui gave a whole bunch of people an opportunity to serve in the Tasmanian Parliament. And, look, maybe this is a fault of Jacqui. She gave them that opportunity, but there was no mentor for them. And that meant it was pretty hard, and a couple of them ended up being wooed by the government, and that didn't work out. So perhaps the problem is it wasn't so much a lack of Jacqui, but the presence of Jacqui, but just the lack of a proper mentor in the Tasmanian Parliament, which is a bit unfortunate. It's a tough place, Parliament, and to throw someone in there without some guidance is a little bit unfortunate. When you join the Labor Party or the Liberal Party, you are nurtured from the moment you get in, and you very quickly find out you don't have many choices, and you just end up doing what the party tells you. It's different in the smaller parties.
Ms. Game, One Nation has had, since the party was formed, about 2/3 of its elected members ever quit the party while still serving in office. Why do you think that is? And also, are you happy with the direction One Nation's going in, to the extent that you would stay in the party if you're actually elected?
So I don't know the circumstances of those people. I'm just not going to comment. I'll just say that it's my view that if you're elected under a party name, then if you find that it's uncomfortable or it's not for you, then the correct thing to do is step and let someone from that party replace you. So that's what my view is. You stand for a party, you stand for the policies and the values of the party, and you represent yourself to electors in a certain way. And then my view is, if for some reason, I don't know, policies change, whatever, and you find yourself in conflict, then that's what you do. I would go back to what Rex said. It is a very tough place to be in Parliament, especially if you're a one-off. I know that because my daughter is the upper house member here in South Australia, and I know it's very hard to be one in a small party on a crossbench. However, what I also know is that a single person from a small party can make a huge difference. And, for example, she's had legislation passed in South Australia without having the numbers, just through persuasion, or I would say possibly shaming the government so they hadn't any alternative but to support what she was wanting to do. But I think that we can make small parties, I think, really contribute to the good governance of this country, and that we offer other solutions often, and they can be taken up. And so to answer your question, if I'm elected under One Nation, I will stay under One Nation. If I find myself in difficulty, I will talk to Pauline, say to her, I don't want to continue, I'll give a seat to whoever you decide is the right person, because I know that voters, when they vote for the Senate, vote for the party. Very few people know who the Liberal and Labor members are. They vote for the policies and the values of the party. It's not personal, and that's why the system allows parties to replace people if something happens to them. Now, in the lower house seats, it's a different story, and sometimes you can be argued that people actually vote for the person. That they just vote for the person, and I can accept that. But again, and therefore, when they step down, there has to be a by-election. So I don't think I'm going to find myself in difficulty. I've worked for Pauline for the last 9 years.
All right.
So I well know the policies and positions. So I don't think you need to worry about me.
All right. Just very, very quickly before we move on to the next segment, Ms. Walter, obviously you're coming to this debate having been originally the Legalise cannabis candidate. We spoke about that on 6 News. We don't need to give an entire answer here. I am just conscious of time. But again, broadly, you're in a situation where you're not running with a party name on the ballot. You are not a member of a party. You would, by essentially being independent if elected. So yeah, just I guess your thoughts on what we've just heard there and party politics in the Senate.
Well, never say never, they say. And I was in for the long haul a few weeks ago, and things changed because it was around my loyalty to South Australia, and my position on legalising adult use cannabis hasn't changed. That won't change. And I still think there's incredible economic opportunities, and there's certainly opportunities for our state with industrial hemp and a whole range of other spin-offs. But this is democracy, and we can make choices. And I think again, but the group that Rod and I have is very firmly with our roots in South Australia, and I've learnt very quickly in the last few weeks that this is where my heart needs to stay, and this is where I'll be, and Rod will be right alongside of me. So yes, it'll come down to what happens on polling day.
All right. Now, we want to, as we, in our second final segment, as long as I don't forget closing statements again, we want to give each candidate the opportunity to ask one other candidate one question. Now, again, we at 6 News do not know what they're going to ask or if they're even going to ask a question, but it is a chance for them to have it. Now, we have asked all candidates to please, in their question, make sure it is as direct as possible to one specific person, so there's absolutely no confusion here. Ms. Walter, I'll begin with you. If you've got a question, who's it for?
Yeah, well, I actually don't.
But that's the first time that's happened then, so saves us time.
No, I don't. I think we'll save that time for other debate. Thank you.
Fair enough. Mr. Patrick?
Yeah, I might ask Jennifer a question, and it's going to centre around the Murray-Darling Basin. Obviously, there's differences between the top end of the Darling River and the bottom here down in South Australia. If Malcolm Roberts and Pauline Hanson were to take a position that strongly favoured upstream and was of great disadvantage to South Australians, would you cross the floor and vote for South Australia?
Believe in any more water buyback. So I'm not imagining, but Pauline is very strong, has a very broad feel for the whole of Australia, and I don't foresee that happening. Should that happen, then I imagine there'll be robust debate. But you know, the high security water licences are here in South Australia, unlike New South Wales, which is hold its water, and unlike Victoria, we've got high security water, and we're very good with the management of that water. And already South Australia is suffering from water buybacks, and there'll be no more. I'm not going to stand for any more water buybacks.
All right, Mr. Patrick, looks like you're satisfied with that answer then? No follow-up?
No, well, I respectfully did ask the question. If you do have a difference, would you cross the floor and vote for South Australia if you couldn't reach agreement with Malcolm and Pauline on a Murray-Darling?
So that's a hypothetical question. I'm telling you that we have been uphill and down dale on...
A pretty simple answer, Jennifer. You either would or you wouldn't. And there are many possibilities that take place in the Senate. You know, there was a good example in respect of the reduction in SDLs in Queensland in the 45th Parliament, which was very detrimental to South Australia. So it's not a hypothetical. I'm asking you, would you cross the floor and back South Australia in circumstances where that would create, you would be in a different position to your Queensland senators, Pauline and Malcolm?
So I'm not going to answer a hypothetical question, but if you put something concrete to me, and after I've talked to Pauline, I will let you have an answer.
I'll take that. No. Thanks.
All right. We will take that one. Ms. Game, if you've got a question to another candidate, you can ask away.
Okay, so I'd like to ask Rex Patrick, during the COVID period, the leader of your party said words to the effect that it was the responsibility of everyone to be vaccinated. Would you now, in hindsight, support that view?
Look, I haven't looked at all of the science. I know there's a lot of information that has flowed since. As you know, I'm someone who looks very, very closely at the engineering and the science in relation to these issues. I haven't turned my mind to it because, COVID has now passed. At the time when Jacqui made that statement, we were different parties and we didn't discuss those issues. So it would be a case of, so I'm not even going to try and explain how or why she might have said that. What I will say is that moving forward, there would be discussions. We would talk about what the right outcome is. And I apologise, I haven't looked at some of this. I have done some FOIs in this space to help people understand what was happening inside National Cabinet, what was happening inside the TGA, what was happening inside the vaccination committees. And in fact, I just recently in the last week passed something to Senator Rennick, an FOI back from 2020. I tend to, I will go with the science.
So I'm not going to ask you the question of what would happen if whether you would cross the floor with Jacqui over that if you came to a different view, because it's a hypothetical. It would be a hypothetical question. Very good, thanks.
Can I just explain? Jacqui and I have an agreement in place that if there's an issue that is South Australian centric, then we will, then there will be an acceptable situation where we may vote differently. But in relation to the Murray-Darling, because Jacqui comes from Tasmania and the Murray-Darling doesn't flow through Tasmania, I can get an extra vote for South Australia.
All right, we will leave that one there. And Mr. Brohier, if you've got a question for another candidate, floor's yours.
Thank you, Leo. My question is to Jennifer. One Nation in its published policies supports the use of medical cannabis. How does One Nation support the use of medical cannabis with children when there is no prescribed upper limit for dosage? There is scientific evidence of harmful functional and structural effects of THC on the human brain. There are no studies as to how quickly a child may become dependent, so that informed consent is in fact impossible. How does One Nation do that?
So, Christopher, that probably is a technical question to which I would normally say I would have to get back to you about. I would just say that we favour medicinal cannabis prescribed by a doctor and making that, readily and easily available. That's my understanding of our policy. And so that leads me to think that those decisions in these very extreme cases, and some of which I'm familiar with, where there's no other treatment, for some forms of epilepsy, there's no other treatment, and these children are fitting, almost constantly and end up with brain damage. I guess, this is where parents and the medical fraternity are going to have to make those kinds of difficult decisions. So it's just that we think that medicinal cannabis, it's been too hard to get. I know it's easier now, but it's still not entirely as good as it should be.
Jennifer, there are increasing applications for the use of medical cannabis for autism and ADHD. And if not, isn't it irresponsible of One Nation to have put out that policy without having a scientific basis for it?
So, again, my understanding is that the fail-safe would be that it's prescribed, and I'm trusting that a doctor wouldn't prescribe it if, there wasn't a scientific base for that.
Yeah, can I, if I may, through you, Leo?
Very, very quickly.
So go to the Australian Medicinal Cannabis Association website, educate yourself, go to the Lambie initiative, look at the research, the scholarly articles, the incredible research that's done to support children with epilepsy that Jennifer's talked about. And also it might be a really good idea now to start thinking about using medicinal cannabis to treat post-traumatic stress disorder in our veterans, because they deserve better.
I got to say, I wasn't expecting cannabis to be brought up. The one debate we don't have endorsed cannabis candidate, but it always comes down to it. So I appreciate that being raised. And look, we're at the point where we want our viewers to vote now in the live chat to give their thoughts on who has won this debate. It goes without saying that this isn't a formal poll and it's influenced by people who are watching and it's not scientific, yada, 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 but our viewers can vote in it if they want, and we'll post those results up on social media when it's done. Now, closing statements, which I haven't forgotten. We want to give each candidate a final chance to make some closing remarks on their party, their platform, anything we've heard tonight. It's up to them entirely. We'll go backwards in alphabetical order by surname. So, Dianah Walter, your closing statement.
Here they go. Something I prepared earlier. I just wanted to make sure that I covered off on everything. South Australia matters, and my closing remarks are actually for South Australians, indeed all Australians who are feeling the pain of policies and legislation that adversely impact their daily lives. Rod and I hear you. To the individuals and families barely existing on Centrelink income support, we hear you. The rate must be raised. Those impacted by intergenerational unemployment and poverty, we hear you. We will work for you and we will work for future generations. To those who found themselves waiting in an overcrowded ED because they couldn't afford to access a doctor for preventative medicine, we hear you. To people with disability and their loved ones who are struggling to get access to the very services they require for activities of daily living, we hear you. To our primary producers, their families and communities grappling in the grips of drought, we hear you. Families seeking affordable childcare and access to childcare in the towns and the places you live, we hear you. To the businesses struggling to keep their doors open because of oppressive overheads, we hear you. To the veterans and families, and I've touched on this, and supporters who continue to advocate and lobby for the DVA to approve medicinal cannabis to treat PTSD and traumatic brain injury, we hear you. Our veterans deserve better. To the first responders living with post-traumatic stress disorder who are having to recount horrendous events to claim compensation, we hear you. How about some presumptive legislation? And to those struggling to enter the housing market, to rent, to buy, and some who must forego food to pay for rent, we hear you as well. And if we haven't heard you yet, please speak up and speak out. Rod and I will fight for you. South Australia matters, and so do you. And if you're able, look for the device. I'm back to front with my camera here. Look for the SA Matters device, and that's the location you'll find us at, and where you are, any postcode all around our state. Thanks, Leo.
There we go. Thank you very much. Next up, Rex Patrick, your closing statement.
Yeah, thank you very much. Look, our focus will be on cost of living. I've talked about that in the opening session of the debate. We'd like to see, we have a strong policy of make Australia make again. So we want to see us not exporting iron ore, but exporting steel, not exporting lithium, rather exporting batteries, not exporting research, rather exporting product. We've got to get value back into our economy. We've got to get complexity back into our economy. We don't want to be the world's quarry. The other thing that I will bring to Canberra is just dealing with the corruption that takes place there and keeping the bastards honest. Since I was known as the transparency warrior in the Senate, and having left the Senate, I have continued in that vein, basically promoting and forcing transparency of government. South Australia needs an independent in the Senate. They need an experienced independent to basically look after our interests rather than party interests.
Thank you very much. Jennifer Game, your closing statement.
So I wanted to draw attention to the number of 15 to 24-year-olds in South Australia who are not in employment and not studying. It's 10%, and 20% in areas of low socioeconomic income. And I think that's an enormous waste, and it's not being given proper attention. In terms of cost of living, One Nation's got a very comprehensive set of policies, including income splitting for families so that they pay less tax, removing GST from insurance, halving the excise tax on fuel, and allowing self-funded retirees to have a higher threshold, and for pensioners to be able to work and not have their pensions affected. We need much smaller government, and we need a lot less waste, and the amount of waste in government is quite shocking, and it's small parties that will do something about that if they get the chance. So what I want to see is a lot smaller government. I want to see a lot more freedom for people, and I want to see some responsibility about the level of debt that we have, because that level of debt is driving inflation, and that's affecting everybody. It's another form of taxation. So there's some very big ticket items that I think One Nation can actually improve the lives of all Australians with. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Last but not least, Christopher Brohier, your closing statement.
Thank you, Leo. Family First advances 3 policies, as I said. We have many others on our website, and we have a developed suite of policies. To attack the cost of living by working to bring down power prices and by a tax system that benefits families. To seek proper holistic care for sex-confused kids and vulnerable people by affirming gender fluid ideology in schools, support the freedom of parents and have a faith-based Christian education or other faith education, and oppose any changes from the Green Labour to remove protection. As people who want to listen to people and hear what they say, without a developed suite of policies. The minimum they must do in proffering themselves for election is to develop policies. Family First has a developed suite of policies. We've identified our key policies. Vote One Family First in the Senate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we got 95% of that. I love the internet. That is where we will wrap up our South Australian Senate debate. The results of that poll, we'll remember to screenshot it, will be posted on social media. Thank you so much to Christopher Brohier from Family First, Jennifer Game from One Nation, Rex Patrick from the Jacqui, Lambie Network, and Dianah Walters from SA Matters for participating in this tonight, especially through all the technical issues. But we got through it. We're at the end, so very, very pleased about that. And we don't actually have any next scheduled debates. We're definitely aiming for one in New South Wales soon, as well Western Australia and Tasmania, which should be fun, and so we'll aim for those. Watch this space on 6 News, and if you can of course support us for $4 a month at patreon.com/6NewsAU. I'm Leo Puglisi in 6 News